I'm a stickler for time on both sides.
That's all right.
Okay, it's 8:15 and I will call this meeting to order. We'll begin with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And moving on to the consent agenda, we will have approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 23rd. Approval of the minutes of the special meeting of April 16th. Approval of the minutes of the special meeting of April 30th. Approval of the minutes of the special meeting of May 2nd. And approval of claims for May 14th. Any questions?
No, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next is public comment. Any commenters? No? Anyone online? I can't see them.
We do have some people online. I want to check just to make sure that Randy is asking. I just want to make sure that everyone else can hear us.
And could you check the Q&A too?
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. So he's asking what's going on.
By the way, are the microphones at an acceptable distance?
Yeah, we should be fine.
Because that was usually, that's further back than they usually.
You can move it forward.
You can slide forward.
I used to get in trouble for this.
That's right.
Well, just don't do it all the time. You know, once and you're good.
It's not like,
Yeah.
Oh,
don't bury it.
Yeah, everything is good at this point.
Mm.
We had one person asking what was going on. I believe he thought the meeting was perhaps starting a little bit earlier than it did.
Oh, okay. All right, so if there's no public comment, we will move on to the general manager's report.
As you know, I was off last week, had a great time. Thank you. Next week, I will be in a conference all week. So I'll be driving down to Oregon on Monday, driving back on Friday, and then the Economic Development Conference in the middle. Other than that, there's a lot of operational stuff I'm going to defer. And then, of course, we've got financial later, and then our whole business slate, which is where I spend a lot of time. So,
Okay,
Just curious about the conference. What's
it's about the economic development, economic trends in the Pacific Northwest. So it's a whole bunch of different economists who are coming, a lot of cross-border issues. You know, what does the drought in Canada mean for river flows, and how does that affect the regional economy, things like that. So it's a general informational from an economic point of view.
And I wonder if they'll talk, will you expect to get some very good background for markets and the Columbia River Treaty and things like that?
That's a big part of it. It's sponsored by the folks, News Data, the ones that do Clearing Up.
Yeah, and they do good conferences.
Yep, I was very, very interested in this. It's they're not advertising for it anymore because the registration closed, but they were advertising for it for months, and I signed up for it.
It's kind of the big picture stuff you wouldn't otherwise get.
That's right. Yeah, and they've got 3 economists, one from Avista, one from the state, and then I think a Microsoft economist. I don't remember clearly who the third major keynote speaker is, but it's that kind of a conference.
So you'll come back wiser with grayer hair.
That's right. And you won't be able to tell.
there is a lot of conversation about the markets. Did you want to say anything about that, or?
So we've recently had communication from WPUDA that they're going to send a letter, or have sent a letter, supporting the BPA leaning. So BPA, yeah.
Very strong position.
Oh yeah,
Very like
it's a strong lean. It's a oh yeah, they're in it. But anyway, what they've said is that for BPA's customers and BPA itself, it makes sense to have access to some kind of multilateral market that is not governed by the state of California, and that kind of that's the big issue. The Cal ISO led markets, which I forget what theirs is called. Is theirs SPPs is Market Plus. I forget what Cal ISO. Oh, it's
Yeah.
EDAM and those. But the issue with the California-led markets is that they're set up so that all of the California utilities are always protected. And that's where if there's any revenue to be redistributed, it stays in California. And so anytime we have to wheel power through California from the Southwest to serve the Northwest or vice versa, basically California utilities end up retaining all of the incremental transfer costs and profits, I should say. And in the January event, that was over $100 million, about $150 million, that should have been redistributed around the West that was kept in California, as an example. And this is not Cal ISO being a bad actor. They were created as a statewide agency, I don't know, 30, 35 years ago, in order to make sure that the utilities in California played well with each other and performed for the state of California.
Right.
That's why it was created, and that's in its charter and bylaws. And if you glom a whole bunch of other organizations around the edges, you're not going to. The tiger's not going to change his stripes. They are chartered to take care of California, and that's the governance issue that Bonneville struggles with. And I agree.
And it would be fair to say Cal ISO in their defense if they were here, but they're here, but we would say that if you join us, then we'll look at improving governance.
They have said that, but changing their governance literally requires an act of the California legislature. And that has, and I guess a couple of things have been taken to them before, and they've simply refused to do it. They said, no, why would we change something that it was created for the benefit of California and change it so that it doesn't strictly benefit California? Right. And, they're in a dilemma. And if they were to vote for that, all the people in California would go nuts. And that's who elects the people who do that. So, it's a dilemma. I think we need a third. And then, the folks who support the EDAM, the California solution, when I say EDAM, it's not cheese, it's the electric day ahead market, EDAM. So the people who support EDAM, they talk about how it's a longstanding ISO, they're able to do trades and do it efficiently, all that. And that, they've said that they would change their governance. And that's in fact the path, but the problem is I just don't think that's true, or that will be substantial enough to really make a difference. So, but that's editorial from me.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, I have one question, and that's is there any action in the foreseeable future that you think would be appropriate for this organization as it relates to the support for the leanings?
I think that we just need to stay with WPUDA. Their voice is louder than our voice. We are working, and as Brian and I are working with our account rep, and they know where we stand, and we're keeping Bonneville apprised on that end. But really, it's the WPUDA would be our largest voice for that. I'm actually working with an organization that's looking at setting up an RTO. And looking at what kind of structure would be appropriate for that. So RTO is not a market, but the two do go together very nicely. Most ISOs are in fact regional transmission organizations or RTOs. Cal ISO is within California. So they control all the transmission in their footprint and all of the markets in their footprint. Exclusive of the munis who are not members, such as LADWP and Turlock Irrigation. A few others are not members of Cal ISO. So it's interesting. Public Power in the Cal ISO footprint is not a member of Cal ISO. That should tell you something. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to old business. We will start with a broadband update. That'd be Andrew.
Yes, and I would definitely like to call on Andrew. He's got something to show you guys.
Okay.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
I want to share my screen here, so give me one moment. Okay, I think you can see my screen. So what I want to do is I want to show you how to navigate to a new project management resource that we've developed, which is specifically for the Point Roberts broadband project. So this is always live. You can send folks to this area of the website, and they can stay up to date on all things Point Roberts broadband project. So we'll go to the homepage and then services, the broadband program, and then it's right here at the top. There's a Point Roberts fiber to the premise project management resource, and we'll click on this. And there's a few tabs here, and I'll go through these just briefly with you. This won't take too long, but eventually we'll have a dashboard as we move through some of the construction in the project. But for now, we have our project map, which these routes came from our design engineering firm. So these are the high-level preliminary routes, and we'll expect in about 2 to 3 weeks to have a revised version of these routes. So this could change, but for now we have these broken out by aerial, so you can see all the aerial routes, or you can click here and you can see the underground, which is not so much. All these purple lines are, some are drops, what are called drops. So from the main road to the end user or the customer location. And so these, again, this is what our design engineering firm will come back as whether these will be aerial connections or underground connections to each of the homes in the project area. We'll have a running tally of customers connected as we move into the construction phase of the project. And so you'll see this updated real time as we get to that point with connections, and there'll probably be some sort of color coordinated area that it'll probably be broken out into different areas. So like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So you'll probably see that in the future, and we'll talk through this in future updates as well. So I'd like to keep referring back to this area of the website in future updates.
I have a question, Andrew.
Sure.
So the construction company decides whether it's aerial or underground?
The design engineering team in a few weeks will give us a finalized construction ready design, which will not only include the construction ready design sets that we then hand to a construction firm that we will select through a competitive bidding process, but they'll also provide us with those routes electronically so we can update them here.
So let me answer the question a little differently.
Okay.
If you've got a home that already has underground electric service from a pole, that would be one where you'd plan to put the fiber service underground, because there's no way to do a strike from the pole to the house. That would, the homeowner would go, no, thanks.
Mhm.
Just not interested. So you would plan on an underground one for there. Similarly, if you've got an underground in the area, so you look at the underground map, if you could pull that up for just a second. Yeah, so if you're in one of the underground areas, you're not going to rise, set a new pole, rise, and then do drop to the house. So it makes sense underground to underground there. And then the last part is if you've got existing overhead on the power line and an overhead drop to the home, it makes perfect sense just to drop communications there.
Mm-hmm.
So what the engineering firm does is they visit each one of these sites and make that determination. And then that's what's included in the design.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris. So we've talked about how the project area has changed in recent updates. And so this is just a visual representation of the original project area. This is the project area that we submitted in our original Washington State Broadband Office grant. And then once the new updated data came out, which are the address points on a map that say whether they're served or unserved, we realized that there was some locations in this project area that were already served by Would-Be-Tel since the time of our application. So what we wanted to do was remove those served areas or the served locations out of our project area. And so you can see the original project area and the new project area. We picked up here on the right side of the point, or the east side of the point, these locations here. And we dropped some locations that are down here. You'll see the routes not continuing down some of these roads and such. And so those are the address points that we took off that were, or that are already served by Would-Be-Tel. So this is now the new project area. We did consult with the state broadband office and our contact there. We didn't need to do a change of scope or anything like that. And we also reached out to Would-Be-Tell and made sure that, you know, if we added this area over here on the east side, that we're not overstepping our boundaries, or if they're planning to serve them anytime soon. And they said, no, you're good to go, asking the state to include this in an updated project area. So all the checks were crossed and T's were crossed, all that kind of thing. So this is our new final project area boundary.
And I guess, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we believe we'll have all of the address points at least passed, if not served, on Point Roberts by the time we're done. So if somebody wants high-speed internet, either from us or Would-Be-Tell, they should be able to get it. And,
Yes.
you know, that's all you can do is make it available, and, you know, it's open access, it's relatively inexpensive. We've got an ISP serving it. And
What do you mean by relatively?
Andrew, what are we forecasting right now for end use service in terms of price?
Oh, in terms of price, I believe $120 for gig services, and I think it was less than that for some other options that folks can subscribe to. I don't have those directly off the top of my head, but I believe it was 120 for gig services.
Well, yeah, we are developing a low income option.
We are not. And remember, we're wholesale,
Yeah.
so we're just providing path, and,
Right.
and Would-Be-Tell. I think they have a low income option, so and new customers would be eligible for that.
Yeah, could you report back us on what their low income option is?
We can find that out and get it to you.
And email.
Okay, so if you want to see a planning timeline or a Gantt chart of where we are in the project, that's available here. You can see a lot of the process, specifically to the engineering phase, has already been completed. We've talked about in previous meetings how we're leading up to getting a deliverable of our final product, which is that construction level design set. We can use that for permitting, going out to bid for material procurement, and then eventually move into going out to bid for construction of the infrastructure. So you can come here and you can see this will continue to be updated as we continue through the project. Same with the project funding. So we have the State Broadband Office, which is the $3.1 million grant, the matching dollars from Whatcom County. And then we have an additional state funding allocation that was just approved in or passed in the governor's budget. So we don't have a contract today for this additional state funding, but our contact at the state has assured me that it's coming. We just need to queue up the contract. So more to come on that. We'll see a breakout of these funding allocations and how much has been expended in each of these pots as we progress. So thought that might be helpful. And then just a historical timeline of where we started and where we are today. So again, I hope this is helpful for folks who want to stay up to date on Point Roberts broadband project. So if there aren't any questions, I'll kick it back to Chris.
I'm excited that we're getting things done in Point Roberts, and I think I have probably lots of questions, and we were supposed to have like a broadband discussion, and we haven't done that yet. But one of the things that continually just bothers me, and maybe somebody can explain it to me better, is that so we get grant funding from the government to deploy broadband, and then Would-Be-Tell is using that fiber to sell someone service.
Mhm.
And they're a private company,
Yes.
and it's 120 a gig. I pay half of that for a gig through a different provider here. And it just seems like a lot of government grant funding for an expensive product. Just from, and again, like maybe there's an explanation that makes more sense, but it's frustrating because I want to be able to offer somebody
Yeah.
something better and cheaper, especially if it's funded by the government.
So the thing to think about here is that our assets that we're deploying here are open access. And we'll have the ability for anybody else who competes on Point Roberts to use our assets and go out and make a different offering to people, either higher speeds, lower prices, some combination of the two. Right now, there's just not anybody else serving Point Roberts. And it's a small market. It was capital intensive to get it set up. We're taking that out of there. So, you know, I can't guarantee that at some point in the future there will be a competitor, but we're making it possible for there to be a competitor. And hopeful that in fact there will be.
And there's no way for us to hold somebody to the fire and say through a service agreement or something and say, you know, you can use our fiber network, but you have to have a low income option that says this.
Could add that.
Well, and I would urge you to think about, number one, that wasn't in the original contract that the state issued to have that kind of restriction. Number two, those restrictions are in the BEAD contracting. So we will have all of that in the BEAD contracting. It's possible that because of those restrictions that we won't get a bid. We won't win a BEAD contract. Because an ISP would just say, well, you know, I'll take half of the money and I'll go ahead and serve this, and it'll be a much lower cost per pass, and then I'll charge what I'm going to charge. And the state would look at that, and you know, they've got to decide. And they may decide that it's better to have them serve than a higher price public serve. But that'll be their call. So you know, that is being done. We could, I guess the issue is that, you know, I think that the way to solve this is not necessarily with service agreements. I think a lot of people have tried that and you end up struggling with it the whole time. It's better to set it up so you can have competition. Even the threat of competition tends to keep these guys more honest.
So let's.
And the other thing is Woodby-Tel's a pretty good outfit. We've been, well, I won't speak for Andrew, he can speak for himself. I've been pleased working with them.
And they're small and local.
They're small, yeah, and they're not, you know, it's not like Comcast or somebody where you've got a regional vice president
And
who
so
covers the whole West
yeah,
Coast.
that's a bit of competition. One of the things I imagine that might foster competition is when there's enough of an installed base of open access infrastructure. Let's remember that prior to the Portland PUD's involvement, would it be accurate to say, Chris and Andrew, that there was no open access broadband infrastructure in the county? And now we're creating some, and we'll create some more. And I assume that that will create a infrastructure for a kind of economic opportunity for the private sector that they haven't pursued yet in Whatcom County. And once that starts to happen, I hope we will see more competition in open access infrastructure. I don't know what you think that might be, please. I'm open to your thoughts.
I mean, one of the things that you said that I just don't know the answer to is how much open access infrastructure existed before we got involved. I just don't know. I would say it appears very little to none because there's no competition, but I don't know.
We don't really know yet.
Yeah, so that issue aside, remember where we are establishing this infrastructure is areas where economically it made no sense for the privates to serve in the first place. And that's why they're unserved. If it economically made sense, like downtown Bellingham, they would have already done it.
Yeah.
And they haven't. So, you know, it's been an infrastructure issue. So yes, we're going to be providing more opportunity. It's going to be a relatively small read, less than 10% of the total market. So if you served every unserved broadband service location with publicly owned open access broadband right now, it would be less than 10% of Whatcom County. So, you know, a lot of the infrastructure is already there. And part of the problem is that in order for a third party to get to some of these areas, they have to cross other ISPs boundaries and essentially either, buy space on their system or overlash or, go through some other process. And then you're right back to the expense of the infrastructure. So the mere fact that we're serving remote areas that weren't otherwise getting service. And so if you're looking at service versus non-service, we're getting service. If you're looking at competitive service versus non-competitive service, well, it's probably non-competitive in most of these areas just because you physically can't get there. But I think it's still better than no service, which is what we got today.
Thank you. Anything else on broadband, Andrew?
I think just one update to switch. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I talking over someone?
Yeah, no, I'm, Chair already asked a question. I'll wait to your answer.
The volume 2 proposal that was submitted from the state broadband office to or up to NTIA was approved on Friday. And a quick scan of that volume 2 proposal doesn't appear to be any significant changes from the draft. So our broadband consortium group that we're members of with NOAANet, they've asked WISVO to provide a red line of any changes that were made from the draft that was submitted to what NTIA approved. So there may be some things in there that could be a surprise, but again, at first glance, read just in the last day, doesn't appear to be any major changes. So that's kind of the big news today. But that's all I've got.
Well, I will follow up. So on that, what does that mean? Like the speed bump or hurdle for us, what Whatcom PD, as I understand it, would be funding and access to funding. Right, the financing, bonding or letter of credit related responsibilities for applying for BEAD funding. And so I'm curious about where we're at on that particular subject. And what we currently see that for us. Is it the same as you talked about in the previous meetings?
Yeah, I think. Well, Andrew, why don't you take a swing at that, and then I'll take a swing at it, and we'll. Because I mean, we've both been involved in different pieces of it.
Sure. The first step, at least how I see it, to answer that question is yes. Initially, yes, that is a concern for our organization to get the letter of credit. But to get to that number, we need to identify our project areas and where we're going to focus. And so that's one thing that we've been working towards with our Port of Bellingham friends is identifying what project areas we want to tackle in kind of a divide and conquer approach. And to back up, we don't set the project areas. The state sets the projects. And I believe there's 12 in our community, in our county. And after working with the port, they've decided that they're going to focus on a handful, and then we've decided to pick up the remaining ones that they're initially saying, well, that they just don't make sense for them. So now what we're doing is we're moving through with high-level initial design to get to a number that we think would cost to serve either through fiber to the premise, similar to the Point Roberts project, or if a hybrid solution where it might be fiber to wireless to get the remaining ones. So that's what we're working on now. We'll get a number that will let us know, well, what's the letter of credit what's that dollar amount going to be based on the projected cost of the projects we want to tackle. So there's that. We're working on that now. The second piece I know is that Petrichor, the ports NOAANet, if you will, the Petrichor consortium, a combination of 7 port districts, they're working with NTIA and the liaison with NTIA to get an exemption for public entities, because the way that they're reading the language is that a letter of credit may not have been designed for public entities anyway under BEAD, that the letter of credit was really designed for private companies wishing to apply for BEAD. So that's kind of a policy push that's happening today. But should that be unsuccessful, we would be on the hook for the letter of credit, which comes down to the total dollar amount in the project areas that we want to pursue. So that's my side of the kind of concern.
Is the, our consortium also supporting the retro, retro tech initiative too?
Yes.
Well, I mean, verbally, yeah. Yeah, we're not putting any money or manpower behind it. We are on the knowing it consortium. The other thing I would add, and this is not me, this is Andrew told me this. The Kitsap County has been able to get a cost-free letter of credit from one of their local lending institutions. Now, I don't know if that's because of a unique relationship between Kitsap PUD and that lender. I don't know if that lender would be willing to do anything outside of Kitsap County. And they might. And so it's one of those things where as we go through this, you know, the question is, are there people out there who would be willing to give us something cost-free because we are, you know, ultimately a rates-based and tax-based organization? You know, they might be willing to do that. And if there's nobody local that would be willing to do it, would somebody else in the state be willing to do it? And, you know, then there's Peter's leaning forward. There's a whole raft of legal issues with letters of credit and bonding and all the other options. So, but again, as Andrew pointed out, we know these options are out there, but you really can't get there till you've got a number. You got to go to them and say, hey, we need a letter of credit for a project of this size in this location. Can you help us? Until you've got that, they don't have anything to react to. The other thing that I would say, because your initial question was speed bumps, and we've talked about a bunch of the process speed bumps that are in here. Policy speed bumps, there are still people who are agitating, Comcast for one, at the regional and national level, that the public entities have no place in BEAD funding at all. And yeah, and they're pretty loud and proud about that. Unfortunately, NTIA has not taken that view. So there's that. The other thing to think about is a lot of the RDOF areas that we've got, again, this is kind of high level. So the RDOF is a previous round of publicly funded broadband. And historically, those have not performed well. So people have taken the money and you know, made investments, but invested not necessarily where they said they were going to. And, you know, at the end of the day, we may have RDOF areas in the county that are unserved and there's no mechanism in terms of funding to serve them. So, you know, just policy issue, just keep that on your radar. That's not an issue today, but
Certainly,
it could
I'm
be.
open to that if the public sector blows it with BEAD funding.
Well, that would be
Like the private sector blew it for the last 20 years.
I'm just saying
broadband
that
funding.
parts of the
Maybe
county,
for public funding for broadband, there's decades of underperforming on the private sector's part on federal direct funding. So
I'm just, that's not something I can do anything about.
yeah,
What I'm pointing out to the commission is that there may be additional service locations, broadband service locations that are unmasked if various RDOF vendors decide not to serve the RDOF areas they already claimed in Whatcom County. So there may be some broadband service locations, some potential customers that are unserved 3 or 4 years from now that appear to be served today. So even if BEAD comes through and gets all of the rest of the locations in the county, it may not end up serving everybody at the end. So just be aware. And last but not least, we don't decide all this. It's either the state or the national government that makes the decision. We've got input to the extent that it's listened to, and we're really good about looping in with WPUDA and others. And as you know, Angela Bennett is a phenomenal spokesperson for public telecommunications, and she's doing a great job for us through WPUDA and other organizations.
I have 2 comments. Okay. One is on the website that you've content you've prepared, Andrew. I'm sure you have, but put some kind of a disclaimer saying that this is notional information rather than information that should be taken as with a high degree of certainty. We're trying to educate the public with this information that's on the website and not trying to direct specific actions of any particular vendor or anybody like that. And the reason is because sometimes people might if it's not clear that way, they might take the data on the fund robber side to explicitly into the. So just for what it's worth, something that I would be cautious about. When you report stuff on. The other point is that when we spoke before about financing, we focused on the bonding. And I attended at the consortium meeting, there was a discussion about letter of credit versus bonding. And some follow-up conversation where letter of credit seemed like to be a more attractive to beauties. Have we kind of evolved to be more attractive to letter of credit because it only requires 25% letter of credit, whereas the bond is over 100%. So it's easy to obviously back at 25%.
I think that, yeah, we've learned more about that. Number one, the question initially was, could our organization even get involved with a letter of credit, or did that appear to be extending credit, which would be a problem for us? So that was one problem. And I think that we're past that. The other issue is that regardless of whether it's a letter of credit or a bond, those things are not free, and we don't have a source of funding to cover that. So, to the extent that one or the other was less expensive, we would tend to prefer that. And it's beginning to appear like a letter of credit may be less costly than a bond. All that being said, you've got to have a counterparty. You got to have somebody extend a letter of credit, and you got to meet all their criteria. And then if there's any payment that's required for that letter of credit, we've got to figure out how to pay for it. And right now we don't have a revenue stream that covers that. So we'd be looking for some additional outside revenue to cover that. And we don't have that revenue stream lined up. So yes, as we find out more about this, we're going to continue to change exactly what we're looking at. But until we actually need the letter of credit, we're probably not going to find out exactly what the terms are.
Thank you, Andrew.
Of course, thank you.
We're going to move on to the adjudication update.
So in the public realm, I haven't seen anything on the adjudications changed in the last 2 weeks. So the filing's been made. I know that various people looked at the filing, and they've had opinions about how to improve the filing. And I think everybody is pursuing that independently right now, which is the way it ought to be. Each person, each entity should look after their own interests and make sure that the filing is accurate with regards to them. And if everybody does that, then we'll have an accurate filing. So I don't expect that we're going to see anything publicly change on that for a little while. Anything that changes with regards to what we're doing from, kind of a litigation perspective, we'll talk to you in executive session, and we really don't have anything for you for that today.
Have people been receiving notices or anything yet?
I
Did
got
you
mine.
receive a notice? Okay.
I didn't get served, I got.
Yeah.
So yeah, you probably received just like a postcard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very lovely postcard.
It's not notice.
Yeah,
That is not notice.
I know,
That's education.
I've been served. Don't worry.
yeah, I mean, it's publicly known that it's on it.
I've got it right here.
There is a court action that has to be the court has to take action, take an order to have summons issued. So and that hasn't happened yet. That's tentatively scheduled, I think, for June. That's a matter of court record. That just the order to initiate that.
Sure.
And so, at one point I was concerned about cash flow for the county, but I'm not anymore because apparently, the county can incur expenses towards the funding that we help secure. So they're allowed to now start spending money against the training and others for community support.
Yeah, we were waiting for the Sunday.
That is my understanding. Although it's possible there's some hang up at the state level that they haven't really
Yeah,
allocated.
they don't have any, they haven't gotten reimbursed yet.
Well, I mean, as we found out with the broadband, where it's a done deal, everything's approved and all that. And then you find out that, oh yeah, even though you've signed a contract, they haven't moved the money around in the right pots, and you got to go through a whole other process to do that. I don't know where the county is with regards to their funding. I suspect they have access to state funding at this point, but I've got no proof of that.
Any questions on the adjudication?
No, we'll wait for, Peter's awesome, but I'll wait.
Okay, that's great,
Well, as Chris mentioned, there's a line between what you want to talk about in public because the petition's been filed.
Sure.
And so I think it's good to defer to executive session on anything specific to the PUD. But yeah, other than the fact that, there's going to be some procedural hiccups because this is a big petition. It's new to the county. These things don't come around very often. And so there's going to be, even on the beginning of this, there's going to be a court administrative issue of trying to get this sorted out. But yeah, you won't see summons being issued until after the court orders that, and that is scheduled for future.
So if somebody calls the PUD, I don't know that anybody would ever do this, but if somebody called PUD and said, hey, I've got a thing in the mail that says there's adjudications happening, and where do I go for help with that? Where would you send?
Well, I'd ask a few questions first
Mhm.
and find out what kind of, are they a simple homeowner and they have a domestic well and, things like that. And if it's relatively simple and straightforward, I would say, first of all, go to the Department of Ecology website on adjudication. And they have promised to have, a bunch of helpful things. Yeah. And I mean, I've looked through it, and if I had a well and I had a question, most of my questions would be answered right there. So that's what I would do. And I know Rebecca would do likewise. And, on the other hand, if they call in and they've got, a couple 100 acres, they've got 4 or 5 claims, they seasonally irrigate, and, some of it's metered, some of it's not, and then I would say, well, you're going to be served and you're going to have to figure out what to do with your claim. And you may want to get a hold of an attorney to have a quick look at this. So you may want to, if you know enough about land rights and water rights, you can go on the county parcel maps and take a look. And a lot of the information is there, but you really kind of have to know what you're doing. So again, I would refer them to the Department of Ecology website as the starting place. And then if it's very complex, then they might want to think about contacting a water rights attorney for a consultation.
And that kind of was my next question. So there's a limited amount of attorneys for water law, right? Will we be seeing an influx of water attorneys in this area?
I don't know how the legal market's going to address this, because you're right. And that's why I think one of the reasons I think ecology is trying to make it user friendly. If you listen to what they're putting out there publicly, they're trying to make it, at least for non-complex cases, something where you may not need an attorney. That isn't to say that someone shouldn't consult an attorney, and how that is going to be addressed. It's going to be a statewide, probably, legal market issue in terms of this adjudication.
I just saw a thing where there's a water law attorney coming to town to give some presentations coming up, and I was just thinking that,
Is it that?
Mhm.
yeah, just so just commenting, are we going to have like a bunch of people coming? I don't know.
No, he's a very senior guy. He's just purely trying to educate. I don't, he has his own special interest, but.
And his practice, when he had an active practice, I don't know if he still does, but it was in the West, but in a different state. And a lot of his orientation is on solutions that literally can't be done in our legal framework. And so it's really interesting. I'd love to be able to water bank the way that they do in Arizona, for instance. But we don't have a state water board. We don't have an organization that, right now, if you wanted to water bank, Department of Ecology might be very delighted to do that. But once you send your rights off, the question of relinquishment comes up. Is it only reserved for in-stream flows, or can it be used for some other beneficial purpose? None of that has ever been done in the state. It's common elsewhere in the West, and that's the gentleman's background. So he's been in areas where you can come up with all these really creative solutions, and they have, and that's just different than our background. I'm not saying we can't do creative solutions here. Just they're going to look different. And
Yeah, they'll be unique to us, but in general.
yeah, nobody else has a foster decision or something that looks like that. There are just some constraints that that other states don't work with that we do. But back to your other question, I think that there will be a long-term demand for water lawyers in Whatcom County, and that will likely drive up supply to some extent. Whether or not it's sufficient, that's Peter's observation on, he's not sure what the market's going to do. I'm not either. Will enough young attorneys decide that this is something to, that it's going to be there for a long time, be worthwhile, that is, professionally challenging for them and desirable. There's going to be 1,000 individual choices that need to be made, and we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Part of, and that's my opinion. It's really important to have the water law culture in the community be about collaboration and minimizing adversarial action, because the more that happens, the more people will be defensive. So when they are less open, they might collaborate. So I think that it's not just important to have more people with a professional background, but with the culture too, of being problem solvers. Just
Okay, is that it for adjudication?
I hope so.
Okay, moving on to geothermal.
So I'll turn it back over to Andrew to give a quick update on geothermal.
Hello.
Hey. Okay, so on geothermal, not too much to report. We haven't heard from the Bureau of Land Management yet on their progress on the boundary areas, and we also haven't heard from the Forest Service. So we're just in a waiting game as of now to decide whether our nominations for land lease or land sale are moving through the process. But we do regular check-ins, as we've mentioned in previous updates, but as of today, there's no new information to report.
No report. Anything?
so one of the things I wanted to check in is how's it going with the new SAC tribe, and any meetings or progress on the grant?
So we've had a couple of meetings. The intent of the NUCSAC is to release the RFP before the end of this month. And that way they can get it evaluated and awarded by the first of June. And they sent the rough kind of an outline. It wasn't even a rough draft. It was just kind of, here's the topic areas we want to have. And Andrew and I spent a bit of time fleshing that out. And then we sent it back over to them, and now they've sent it. I think they sent it back to us. Didn't we get another pass at it, or not yet?
No, I don't believe yet, but we had to first go around, which they were very thankful for.
Yeah, and so it's been really good, and I think you will see it come out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I heard through the grapevine that it seems that there's a lot of mutual appreciation going on as far as collaboration. So.
Yeah, they've been really good about it, and it's one of those things where they're the lead agency, so if they wanted just to do it all and take care of it, they could.
Yeah.
And they haven't done that. They've leaned on us. It's been nice, and
Great.
they took our feedback, and it looks like it's going to be a good collaboration.
Good collaboration, yeah. Today, the governor is completing the thing that was canceled because he got sick. So he's having a visit out to the NUCSAC tribe. I think it's a very small group of people that are doing that meeting and visit, because he's never visited. The governor's never visited the NUCSAC tribe, so it's like a thing that has to get done like soon. And so I think it's a special event. I don't know if any of us are going out for that event.
First I've heard of it.
Okay, just an FYI, okay. But I know the geothermal will be part of the.
They'll probably talk
success.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was in governor's practice.
Anything else on geothermal? No,
I have nothing.
let's wrap it up.
Okay,
Moving on to new business.
first one is Kurt. You're going to talk to us about the BP intake.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Peter. I'm here this morning to request your approval for the demolition of the BP intake. This is the building that is right next to the Ferndale Main Street Bridge. The building is starting to fall apart on its own, but it is essentially built out of asbestos. And so we are looking to proactively demolish it before it becomes an issue. This would be only the basically from the concrete up demolition. The concrete structure will stay there. I can't imagine what it would take at this point to demo that. There are some wells that are in that concrete, so part of this would be to kind of cover those well caps, so we don't have the possibility of another issue as if we were to demolish it, that people would be falling into holes. So that's part of it. So there's the asbestos, there's the steel structure, and then capping the holes in the facility, and then leaving the overall concrete there. So we're just trying to remove that in a proactive manner.
How much was that?
It's $141,766, $776.40.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about, and you may want to answer this offline. But the question is, I'll ask the question. That's, what is the implication of demolition of the intake structure on water rights in our water certification?
So my understanding is that the water rights were transferred and consolidated with our Ferndale Plant 1 rights.
That's
So
correct. That was done previously.
And the only reason I was asking is sometimes when you demolish something, there's a potential of losing associated.
That's correct, but it's the rights have already been moved years ago.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I will.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid for demolition of the district's BP intake structure. So it is that BP sold that infrastructure or transferred that infrastructure to the PUD. But
Sorry, what was the question?
it was the old BP intake structure.
Correct. Yes, that's the old one, and yes, that's why we call it that. It's the old BP intake.
I will second that motion.
That's because BP owned, was now the Phillips 66 refinery at the time the transfer was made.
And
It's not the current BP, it was, the station was built by Mobil in 1954 to supply the refinery out to the water.
So we can add all those names to the history. Anyway, okay, it's second motion.
Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Okay,
you, commissioners.
Commissioners.
Next, I'd like to call on Annette to review our annual report.
Good morning, commissioners.
Morning, hi, Annette.
There we go. All right, my Zoom was being a little slow there. I'm going to share my screen with our presentation for the year end. So this is what we do every year. The state auditor's offices, we were required 180 days after the end of the year to submit an annual report to them. And that's what they base their audits off of and all of that. So at that same time, when we're asking for the approval of that, we'd like to kind of do a high level overview of what happened in the previous year. It's a little different because we like to incorporate the budget, because that's a little bit more appropriate for what we want to look at than just all the audit issues that they have brought up. So if my screens don't want to admit, just a minute. Just a minute on this. Why does it want to advance?
Yeah, I see the presentation.
There we
Sorry
go.
about that. There we go. Okay, back to my presentation. So the 2023, just kind of like a high level look back at what were some issues in last year. So we are still continuing to battle against our supply chain. The lead times on some things, they're getting a little bit more predictable, is my feeling, but some pieces of equipment, I think in the electrical, Garrett was saying, we're looking at 3-year lead time on some pieces of equipment. Alcoa officially announced that they were shutting down in March of 23. Ferndale substation, I have compared this to Groundhog's Day because I was here last year saying the exact same thing, that we think we're almost done, and it still keeps dragging on. So that has still been a challenge this year. And then telecom, as Andrew has talked about, we were able to establish multiple grants to do a fiber build up in Point Roberts. We did escape frazzle ice in 23, but in the middle of January, it did return. And so hit us pretty good there. And then again, as we have in our old business, geothermal, we've started just the very, very tip of looking at that. So what I'm going to do is, this is similar to like what we've done in the past. And I compare the 2023 financials with 2022 and then with budget. This is not a gap per se statement like you're going to see in the annual report. And the reason is because I've included the budget. So it's more of a budget version of it. And how those differ is the cash expenses have been taken out. So no depreciation, no amortization. And then also the pass through to Phillips 66 has been taken out. Part of what we bill Phillips 66 is a straight off the BPA bill. And so those numbers are so big that they end up hiding a lot of the variances. So those have been removed there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through section by section and just kind of pull out the high level issues to look at and issues, some variances, and then we can talk if there's any questions on that. So the first one is our revenue. So industrial water, you can see, is pretty much in line with what budget was, slightly over last year. That's a lot of due to rate increases, but we did have more consumption. Irrigation bounces around just due to the summer and the water precipitation. So those are pretty variable usually. Grandview is a bit of a worry. This is the second year in a row that both consumption and revenue have fallen. Healthy Pet in October of 2023 announced that they are shuttering their plant, and they were the biggest customer that we have over in the Grandview system. Our electric utility, that's right in line with what we expected there. And then miscellaneous revenue, that's just all the miscellaneous things. Mainly this reflects the interest income that we have, but it also has lease income and any penalties that we bill towards the customers. And then down below, just kind of a quick snapshot of what the consumption has done, both in water and power over the years. That 2022 power consumption drop was during a turnaround at Phillips 66. Any questions on that side?
Yeah, I'm just curious about irrigation. Would we expect irrigation to be significantly higher this year then? Curious.
You know, that's hard. I mean, if you can tell me what the weather's going to be and how dry it's going to be, I can give you a prediction. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I mean,
kind of
it
how it
would
plays.
seem reasonable given drought conditions for them, but we don't know what, you're right, we don't know what the weather's gonna be like in June and July.
Well, and we really don't know what the irrigators are gonna do. I mean, there may
Well,
be
yeah.
land they let go fallow and then they don't irrigate and we just don't know.
We don't, yeah, okay.
All right, so now more into more of the expenses. So labor and benefits are pretty much right in line. There were some swings. There was a couple positions that we had budgeted that we didn't fill, but then usually those swings in the labor and benefits is due to capital. Because we budget a certain amount into our capital projects, and if that labor doesn't show up in those capital, then it just defaults back into our expenses. So sometimes you'll get a variance in labor expense, but it doesn't mean we've hired or gotten rid of people. It's more that we just didn't spend quite as much labor into our capital. On the O&M, we have down there, the biggest variance there is in the extraordinary maintenance. We had 1.2 budgeted, but we only ended up in 2023 just under 400. A lot of those O&M extraordinary maintenance projects did get pushed into 2024. So we will see a repeat of some of those projects. And then under admin, the 2023 versus the 2022 shows almost no variance, but there's some big swings there I wanted to talk about. The outside services, we had more than budgeted in legal expenses. We just had some unexpected legal expenses come up. And then also in 2023, we're finishing up the rate study with FCS. So that was also increased the 2023 budget. Under fees, permits, and assessments, the 2022 was considerably higher, and that was the election cycle. So that unfortunately hits our statements every other year. So there's always a good swing. So we'll see another one this year, an increase. And then under miscellaneous in 2022 was quite a bit higher. And that was the very tail end. If you remember, we had started looking at a refinery substation rebuild. And then at the last minute, the refinery decided to postpone that till the next turnaround, just due to a lot of the uncertainty in getting material and if we could meet their timeline. And so we ended up expensing a lot of that, or all of that capital project. And so there was some just tail end expenses that had come in that we ended up expensing in 2022. Any questions on that one?
Not from me. Did you have any questions?
All right,
Yeah,
so
I
business
said
service.
something, but it was probably pretty minor. Let's keep going.
Let's keep going.
We'll have plenty of time to go over this stuff.
All right, so business services, this is where we do business for outside entities and get reimbursed. So typically this is grants, but every once in a while we'll have reimbursement for some of our staff labor. So down below, instead of repeating the 2023, 2022 budget, what I did is just did the revenue and expenses so we can see how they offset. So for example, the telecom feasibility we had in 2023, we received, $50,000 in income, but in 2022, if you look, that's when the majority of those expenses came in. And then parts of these, like the Fairfield and Double L, I know we are getting doing work on that in this year. So that's just been pushed out a little bit into 24 on some of that. And then like the cybersecurity, we started doing work on that, but we're starting to get now in 24, we're getting some of that reimbursement for those grants. Does that look good?
Yep.
All right, so now to more of the bottom is the capital costs. So the debt service, we didn't issue any debt this year, so it was right in line with expectations. And then the transfers capital project, that's the piece of our revenue, our rate revenue that we receive and then is put towards capital projects, either existing, current ones or future ones. And then down below, I just kind of highlighted the bigger capital projects that we had going on last year. And the couple I wanted to make sure we just pointed out is RW28 and RW38. RW28, they both reference Plant 1. As Brian has said, our Plant 1 water intake is on life support. And so the RW28 are the projects that we're doing to keep it running currently. So like last year we had air compressor, we had some gate valve, we had, I know this year we had some wood replace. Excuse me?
Oh, and we had the pump 5 work this year.
Right. So we have, it's just maintenance and they're getting to be more and more. So we wanted to categorize that separately from RW38. And RW38 is the actual cost and project to rebuild plant 1. So right now, all that entails is internal labor and also our engineering costs. But I wanted to keep those separately so we can kind of see how that's going. And then, of course, the E22 down at the bottom, that Ferndale sub, that is the groundhog capital project that just keeps going on and going on. All right, so a little break from all the numbers. I kind of wanted to put some visuals to some of the things we're talking about. So as Chris mentioned, our high head pumps, and you probably remember over at plant 1, we've had some issues. In total, there's 5 high head pump motors over at plant 1. At one point, we were down to 1.5 motors that were running. And so what this picture is the thing that crane's holding is actually the pump. And that's the one, if you remember, we've had a lot of troubles with, not necessarily this exact one, where we took it out for maintenance and the vendor dropped it. And then one time they brought it back and the crane was lifting it up and the welds broke. And so we've had a number of issues just trying to get these back into working order. And then the little spaceship that's up on the loading dock, that's actually the motor that runs these pumps. So I just kind of wanted to give you a little visual. And then over on the right-hand side, we pulled the pump out to inspect, and they discovered that the impellers on the pump had been worn down. And you can see that in the picture on the right. Now, we were able to, very, very luckily, be able to figure out how to do a coating on that so we can extend the life of those impellers without doing a full brand new buy or else a total replacement on that. And that's kind of the line that we're walking, that's we're trying to balance. We have to do to the repairs to keep the plant running, and yet we're looking at rebuilding the whole plant. And so walking that line between putting the money in to be a reliable plant, and yet knowing that that could be a short-term fix because we're going to start doing a rebuild on that. So that's kind of a it's kind of a struggle that we're working with. And then just some metrics. So up in the upper left is like a high level cash flow. You'll see that in more detail in the annual report. Money coming in, money going out in big generalized categories. That does include all the reserves, those beginning and ending balance numbers. And so I broke that out down below that. So you can see the red portion of the columns are the money that we can actually spend on operating and capital. The blue portion is restricted through bond covenants, and then the green portion is from our financial policy, what we've set aside as the reserves, both in operating and capital. Then in the upper right hand, just kind of high level look at how much we've been spending in capital. And over the years, you'll see it ebb and flow. And so as we're starting to ramp up towards the plant 1 rebuild, you'll start seeing that increase significantly. That big one in 2021 was where we did the bulk of the work in the Ferndale sub. And then down below, the last one, the yearly debt service. That's just kind of the historical where our debt service has been. But now that we're starting to look at issuing debt for this plant 1 rebuild, that's going to escalate quite a bit and go through the roof. So I always like to kind of keep that in the front, that we are paying some significant debt service on those. And then telecom. Telecom's not an official utility with us yet because we don't have any operating revenue. When we start receiving the operating revenue, well, actually this fall, when we start doing budget, you'll see another telecom will be a broken out utility. But for now, I just wanted to kind of break out and show you what the activity was in 2023. So you can see the cash that we received in per grant and some other contributions, and then the expenses that are going out. And those are being that net loss at the bottom, those are allocated then, excuse me, between the other utilities. And then just looking forward, some of this is repeat from the first slide on the 2023 issues. But again, supply chain and huge increases in costs are something that we're struggling with and dealing with. And both our consultants and our customers are also dealing with that. So when we go out to bid, there's a lot more reserves or contingencies built into those. So prices are going up quite a bit. We have had some unbudgeted costs. Parts of those are like unbudgeted or unexpected expenses due to repairs, and then some other projects that have come up. So we need to keep an eye on those. Staffing, I know we've talked about that in the past, but that's getting to be a worry also. Of the number of people looking to retire in the next couple of years is getting up there. And then again, water treatment plant 1. Just trying to decide, that's going to be our most costly project we've done. And so just making sure that we can navigate that wisely is what we're concerned about. And that is the end of my presentation. Is there any questions?
So I had a question on the last slide. And you brought this up a couple times about supply chain and costs. I was starting to get the impression that there were some patterns of the areas where we're seeing increased costs. And is there some way to describe where and how costs are increasing? Or is it pretty much across the board? Because I thought for what, like, I remember some of the material costs that started coming back down again. So I'm just curious, if you were to characterize the costs, how are they showing up? And where, what do you see any patterns?
So we're starting to see our competitive bids come in closer to our engineered estimates. But don't let that fool you. We've adjusted our engineer estimates up. So it's, what we're seeing is it's coming through in labor costs, transportation costs, and material costs.
So
And
it is showing up in all
it's
sectors.
pretty much showing up all the way around. And the issue with the consultants, the issue there is that we've got some very good consultants that we worked with for a long time that have suddenly lost all of their senior people at the end of COVID. And now they're struggling to replace them with folks who aren't as experienced. And, so we're getting higher bids for less performance from some of these folks. And we're actually going to different consultants, in an attempt to rectify that. So really, it's kind of all over. And I would just say that, there was a fellow named Schumpeter a long time ago who said that prices are always sticky downwards. And Keynes also said that, but later. And you see that coming out of an inflationary period, that the rate of increase slows, but the prices themselves don't retreat. And so that's kind of what we're seeing economy-wide, and that's certainly playing through with our individual costs.
I have a question on it.
Sure.
And maybe Chris. So the telecom activity, we have a net loss of about $127,000. And you said it's being allocated between other utilities.
Electric and water.
Like I know at the city, like stuff that's raised, revenue that's raised when water has to be spent on water. And so we have a different model. Apparently we can subsidize telecom with the water utility.
We can. What it looks like is it gets converted into overhead, and then the overhead is allocated. Like I'm overhead.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm allocated across all of it. You see a piece of me in that $126,000 loss.
Okay.
Because some of me's allocated to that. And then it gets allocated back as an overhead essentially to the other utilities, and that's how it's supported.
So the subsidy, that's only appropriate for management and staffing, that wouldn't be appropriate for digging trenches or hanging wire, obviously, and we wouldn't, that's not something that's not being subsidized.
Not yet. I mean, at some point, right now it won't be because we've got grant funds to
Right.
cover it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm interested in, because I'm sure it would come up, is that we won't raise water utility rates to subsidize telecom infrastructure, or would
Well,
we?
indirectly,
We have been.
Okay,
There isn't any other place for the money to come from.
yeah.
I think, I was gonna bring this up at another part of the agenda in the commission reports. But since you've asked a question, I asked a question. I think, we're doing a monthly workshop, right? Is it monthly we're doing or bi-monthly?
Remember, we were gonna have the telecom workshop in May and we decided to defer until the temporary person came on board. So we're likely gonna have two in June. One on markets, one on telecom.
Well, and I would like to add a third topic for a workshop to happen. And again, you and staff can figure out. And come back to us with, what we think is the best workshop to have in what order, but somewhere in there, we need a budget workshop. So we can ask some of these more, in-depth questions that relate to how are we indirectly subsidizing one activity or another? There's questions about, there's other things I don't want to bring up now, because I don't want to go into a workshop now, as you.
Yeah.
The right time to do that is in a workshop, not in the business meeting. But I very much think that it would be appropriate to have a budget workshop where we get to dig in a little deeper with Ann in particular. And that's, sorry, we get to dig deeper with the net and the operations team on how we're using our funds. And, what are the cross linkages? What is the overlaps? And so that, I don't know how you feel about that. But I'd like to
Yeah.
propose we do that.
Sure. Yeah, I guess yes, that would be good
Okay.
to talk about that. I just want to know, like, at what point do we limit raising rates for one utility to cover another?
Yeah, establish some policy. Yeah.
Right, because I feel like if I was like a water user that had no desire to use our telecom, like I might be irritated that I have to pay a lot of money to.
Well,
Do you know what I mean? I'm not trying to be snarky. I feel like we all
and-
care about our pocketbook.
And we've been very transparent about all of this, and I'd just like to remind you, and Annette has all the details on it, but we've used the electric fund and various water funds to fund irrigation. Irrigation's been a loser for us since day one.
Sure, yeah,
And that's been essentially on the other water
right.
lines.
Right.
And we've done a loan to cover Grandview, and I
Mhm.
can't remember if that was from other water customers or if that was an electric loan, but we've been moving money around the whole
Yeah.
time. And the initial conversation before I got here was kind of an acknowledgement that yes, we're going to have some startup costs on telecom. Yes, they're going to go several years, and that we're going to essentially absorb it like overheads, and that we're going to work hard to build this thing till we've got some revenue that offsets that.
Yeah, that predates myself as well.
Yeah.
It predates you. And I don't think I've ever seen the crossover. Like, I feel like this is the first time that I've seen a crossover from one utility into another. Like if irrigation is covered by, other water stuff, it's still water. And it just probably, we can save this for another time. Sorry.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, not to have just a generic budget meeting where we talk about budgeting as a process, but rather, let's wait until we've got our proposed budget.
Sure.
And because there's gonna be the big thing that's gonna be in there, I know you're gonna want to talk about is, oh my gosh, what are we doing with Plant One? Where are our customers on this? Why are you making this recommendation? That's gonna be the elephant in the room. We can also deal with this, but let's get a budget in
Yeah.
front of us. So it's probably, and then, what do you think?
August or something.
Yeah, July, August, September, somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, our draft presentation on the budget's in October. And we do have a work session. I don't have it in front of me. usually in, I think it's August or September, just to get high level ideas from you of where you want to go with the budget and anything you want to focus on. And then in October is where we have the draft. Okay, here's what we have. Here's what we've received from you and from customers and from staff, and this is where we're at. And that's where I try and get that feedback. So I'd almost say, you know, in the October range, so we can, like Chris said, we would actually have numbers in front of us to see where the numbers are going back and forth.
I've got some concerns. So, I would like to see that happen soon. And let me explain why. Is that, you know, it took for me a couple years, and also is when I started to see some of these things. What, captain of my questions was, here's Commissioner Arnett. They aren't specific to one particular year. So I would like to have on the agenda for our next commission meeting. This topic of what the budget workshop should address. It'll give us time to think a little bit more about what we want to see on that agenda. And I'm also extremely curious about the output of you talking to your management team, your staff. And this open-ended question that I have for the team, for the staff, is what do you think we ought to know about things about how we spend our money that are not ideal? Let's repeat that again. What do you think the commission ought to know about the way we spend the money that you think we ought to know that aren't maybe ideal?
I'm gonna have a conversation with that nothing section.
That's what I want to have in the workshop. And obviously there's tactful ways of having those conversations, respectful ways of having those conversations. I'm not discouraging, I'm not encouraging.
So I think, you know, before we get too far afield here, if you want to have something that deals with real numbers that's before the October meeting, we can use the 2024 budget. And that the one that's already been approved, that's in place and that we're spending.
Yeah,
But we can do that before the October meeting. And but I mean, in a sense, it's going to be not anything you can change because it is what it is. It's already been approved.
yeah.
We're in flight and we're taking care of that. But it will be illustrative of the kind of transfers that are done back and forth.
Right, and remember, I mean, the commission isn't a tactical body. It's we're thinking long term, and so obviously we need to approve the next year's budget. But in addition to that, we want to develop greater and greater understanding of how we spend money in the process.
I don't see the urgency before October. Maybe it's something we can tackle over the summer.
Well, I don't mean it
Yeah.
has to be the next meeting,
Yeah.
but I don't want to wait
Yeah,
till
yeah,
October. That's my concern.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
We can definitely maybe put a pin in it and start thinking how we want to tackle that over the summer, what we want that to look like, since it's something that's just coming up.
Yeah, and since
Yeah.
today, I was thinking maybe
Sure.
next meeting, but if you
Yeah.
care, if you think it's
I think that we have a,
meeting's better, or?
yeah, we have a lot coming up with appointing a new commissioner.
Okay.
It might be something better suited.
Maybe in June.
There's 30.
Yeah,
We've got 2 work sessions we're planning on having in June,
Yeah,
telecom and markets.
so
So just,
maybe, yeah.
just
Maybe
as a
you're right.
reminder.
Maybe we should put it on the agenda for July.
July, let's
The
do it
workshop, I
July.
mean, the discussion,
Yeah.
the plan for the workshop, we should have before July.
Sure, and we can do that in open session during maybe the commission orders.
Okay,
We want that to
maybe
look like.
if it doesn't come up one way or another, in our next May meeting,
Uh-huh.
let's try to discuss it a little further.
Sure, you bet. Annette, thank you for this wonderful presentation. Raised a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it was done beautifully.
Thank you.
Are you looking for action on that? Of any sort?
I don't think,
Yes.
and that we're not,
No, we are,
We are
because I
looking-
need to turn it into the state auditor's office.
okay.
So do you want to move to approve the action?
Yes, I'll thank you, sorry. I'll make a motion to approve the action memo to accept the district's annual report.
I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next thing is for our special call meeting to discuss the temporary or the interim commissioner appointment. And as a reminder, the window closes for those applications on May 20th. And one thing that I would urge you guys to think about is perhaps doing it in the afternoon of the 21st. So if we do get a last minute entry, we can at least check and see if they're a registered voter in the district and that they actually live in the district. So
May 21st, what day of the month is that? Do you know?
don't, Peter's looking it up.
Tuesday.
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 Yeah, we come to the.
But what time period?
Yeah, it's a week from today.
You want to do that?
Yeah, I'm fine to do it. I'm
Afternoon.
afternoon, evening, I'm fine to whatever.
Yeah, I would just recommend in the afternoon, wherever,
Yeah, my
wherever's
whole
up. It
afternoon
could
is actually open.
Yeah, so is mine. So,
do 1:30 or
okay. Well, actually, can we do it a little later than that? Can we do it at like
Yeah.
3?
we could do 3 to 5.
Okay.
So
And-
the process on this would be, at that point, I would think we would want to interview the candidates if they're available, or is this where we would set that?
Yeah, no, so what you can do, if you make it part of the package of the special notice in the meeting would be to have interviews, which have to be an open session. You can have evaluation in executive session and then appointment. And so that's one way you can think about that.
That's maybe 2 hours for the meeting.
Yeah, I wrote down 3 to 5. How many people have turned in applications as of yet?
2.
2.
Where the 2 are,
They are Andrew Redding and Todd Lagosty.
and we.
So I'm gonna reach out to Eddie.
Nominated the third.
And I'm gonna reach out to Eddie as he was nominated, but again, I would encourage anybody who lives in the district that's interested, throw your name in the hat. Way to do it is to send me an email cover letter that just says, hey, I'm interested in this job, and attached is my resume. That's all you need to do. And I'll make sure that you guys get it as soon as I get it. And I do have to forward you the 2 that we have.
So, do we want to talk about how many questions we need? Set some rules for that.
I was thinking of Monty Python, the questions 3.
No one expected the Spanish Inquisition.
That's an excellent. I don't have questions.
How about we can each get questions to you and you can look over them and sort of, decide whether or not, I don't know. Maybe not decide whether or not they're good, but pick a couple.
Sure.
And then so we can come prepared. But-
Well, I mean, there's the normal stuff. Can you tell us about your background? Can you tell us about why you want this job? Can you tell us about what your vision is for the future of the utility? Just some open-ended questions and let them rip.
Well, I've got some more pointed questions.
Okay. Well, I mean, clearly there'll be follow-on questions to all of them.
Yeah.
So great, let's do that. And by Friday, would be okay with you?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Is that okay with us?
Yeah.
Friday, we sent to make.
That's fine. By Friday, we can send a couple questions. And so will they come in and interview alone with us and one at a time? Does that,
It'll be an open.
It's an open
Yeah,
meeting,
I don't know why you would.
okay, so.
We can't do it in private.
not the interview for electeds.
Yeah,
We can have deliberation in private.
we can have
Correct.
deliberation.
So do we need to have that in the special meeting, the opportunity to have?
Well, no, we'd have the interviews and we'd have an executive session to evaluate candidates, and then we'd have back in open session to make any announcement, if any.
And will you be the legal counsel? Then?
I think it'll be John.
Okay, well, can someone get all the information to John?
Sure.
I'll get it to him. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and John and I talked about this very thing before he left.
okay, great, so you're on top.
And Brian will be representing me in that meeting.
Okay. Yeah, because you'll be at a conference.
I'll be in Oregon.
So, but in terms of, do you want John to be the receiver of these questions to put together, or are you gonna do that?
No, just send them to me and I'll
Okay.
get them out to everyone.
Okay.
The the other question I would ask the commission is, do you want this to be an in-person only or a hybrid meeting? I've got one that says in-person only.
I would like it in person only also.
And I think that's fine.
Yeah.
As long as we just post it that way.
Yeah. I know that we have hybrid meetings, so.
Yeah.
Lot folks to show something.
Yeah.
And
The
then
the law is that it's encouraged, but you, for the most part, you do have,
Plenty of open.
yeah, you have a lot of remote
Yeah.
access meetings. It's encouraged.
And then just a question for both of you. What do we do if one or more of the candidates just can't make it? What would you like me to do?
Well, we'll deliberate an executive session and if they'll be able to answer by email, I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, if they can't make it, we can send our questions, I suppose, by email and they'll be included in deliberations, right?
I don't,
Think about that one to the extent that interviews, but yeah, you might be able to do that. We have to work on that one.
Cause we can't change our schedule to fit the
Right.
interviewer's schedule, you know.
no, but one thing you could do is if, for instance, Todd, forgive me, let's say 5 people apply.
Yeah.
Okay, and you might want to talk to all 5 of them based on their resumes, but only Todd and one other can be here. You know, would you want to go ahead and conduct that and then maybe not do the executive session, have another special called meeting a week later, you know, finish the.
That's our prerogative.
It's your prerogative. I'm giving you, you know, this is something to think through so that if it comes up, you've thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, just following up, I don't see any reason why you couldn't have a written submission in response to questions.
If they can't make it.
If they can't make it, to answer that specific question.
Right. I think that would be fine.
So then give me the
And then-
questions Friday and I'll get them back to you and we'll start that
Yeah.
whole iteration. Earlier is better.
Mhm.
If you get them back to me today, I'll turn them around.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
because we don't have a lot of work days.
Yeah, okay.
But Thursday I have to. Close the business about 5 PM or can I do it at 8 PM?
Well, there won't be anybody here after 4. I can almost guarantee you that, but
Before you guys show up on some.
I just have 2. Other than like, how you doing? And I. Tell us little about it.
But just for John's, I'm sending a note to John, but it's 3 to 5 on the 21st, right?
Correct. Okay,
and
so,
I guess we need probably a motion to have the
I'll make
meeting
that
set.
motion to call for a special meeting on May 21st from 3 to 5 PM. To discuss the appointment and potentially make the appointment. For the interim beauty commission for District 1.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
And
commissioners.
Moving on to the operations report.
Good morning, Commissioners and Peter.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
Have a couple of items for you. I'll start with the positive one. I'm sure you're aware that because the project's becoming more and more public, that AltaGas is in the pre-development phase of a large green hydrogen project that an ultimate build out would require about 300 megawatts of power. PUD is intimately involved in those pre-development activities. The latest stage is we're waiting for a contract, the system impact study contract agreement from Bonneville Transmission Group. And we expect to receive that next week. That's sort of the kickoff of the interconnection study phase of the project. And once that contract's offered, we will be required to pay a deposit to Bonneville, which will be reimbursed to us by AltaGas. I guess the other thing I'll add here is that we are the main party because we're the local serving utility. we are the main party to deal with Bonneville on the interconnection. So all the studies, future studies it'll be done through agreements with Bonneville that the PUD will sign, and then AltaGas, as the other member of the team, will reimburse us for those costs if we agree to go forward to the next step. So the project is underway. As I've cautioned before, as Chris has cautioned as well, the real fly in the ointment is always going to be, for a project of this size, it's going to be gaining sufficient transmission capacity on the Northwest grid so that this project can secure the power supply it needs to operate. And we're not at that phase yet. We're still working on local facilities and what impact a large project would have on them. So that's kind of the update. I just wanted to let you know the project's still moving. Be glad to answer any questions you may have at this point on that project.
So as far as in our county, or in our zone, are there any constraints on 300 megawatts? I think is the infrastructure all capable of handling that we have present? Will we need to make investments to upgrade our infrastructure to be able to support that load?
The infrastructure, because the site of the project will be the former Alcoa smelter site, the infrastructure in terms of the Bonneville facilities are sufficient to handle that size of load. It becomes more of an issue upstream transmission capacity and who owns the rights to the capacity. So local facilities, there'll be things that need to be done. And to give you one example, we have a project this summer to put in additional fiber optic cable that will connect the Alcoa substation site to our fiber network that's used by our SCADA system. So we're putting infrastructure in place that will facilitate communications between Bonneville and us for that project. There'll be other costs that Bonneville will incur to upgrade communications on their side. So there will be costs. There's sufficient capacity in the facilities, but there'll still be a cost associated with interconnecting the facilities at Cherry Point.
So our PUD's role, just to want to get confirmation, will be in supporting the transmission and supplying the water for this project.
Our utility commissioner will be supplying the water, yes. We will be supporting the project as the intervening utility. We are not making the transmission arrangements, nor are we providing the power supply. That's being done by third party. So we may have couple facilities at the Intalco substation to take receipt of the power and then deliver it to the green hydrogen project.
Do you know yet how many gallons per day or how you're quantifying the amount of water that we think will be needed?
So, Brian, weren't they like 1.5 million gallons a day?
Yeah, about just the numbers I saw for the initial startup phase, it was about 1.3 million, but that was only for the water for process. It didn't include water for cooling, anything else. But yeah, about 1.3 million a day, which would rank them as one of our smaller industrial water users.
Yeah, and most of that is cooling water. It's not processed water. So they're looking at producing 100 tons of 100 metric tons. So 100,000 kilograms of hydrogen a day. And you know, you can get that out of the calculation of water. It's nowhere near 1 million gallons of water. So what they're actually going to use to electrolyze is a relatively small amount of very pure water. So it'll take some of the raw water and they have to purify it and get all the minerals out of it and then run it through their electrolyzers. But the bulk of the water is going to be used to cool the electrolyzers because those things get hot.
And we have no visibility on with the supply, how far they are in getting the supply of electricity land goes.
You know, Brian asked and I asked, and both times that I asked and both times I heard Brian ask, they said they already have it.
Okay.
So, you know, and that's why they're with the it's a Von Grid, isn't it? That they're with?
Avangrid, yes.
Yeah,
And they're a big East Coast utility.
worldwide,
And worldwide. utility.
worldwide utility.
And they already manage large renewable projects in eastern Oregon.
So they could easily get the supply.
I'm not gonna say easily, but they claim to already
Well,
have
I'm
it.
sure that PUD could get the supply.
They claim to already have it, and they're pretty confident about that, and they even claim that they've got the path.
Okay.
So, you know, we've asked, and that's been the answer, and that frankly satisfies me.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Any other questions on the project?
And you had a couple things you want to tell us about that started with good news.
Yeah, yeah. One of the other things I thought I should bring to the commission's attention is that in recent weeks, we've had numerous attempts, legal, unauthorized access of both our standpipes, which we use for blow-offs off our 24-inch lines, and off hydrants, primarily in Grandview, but we do have some hydrant facilities outside of Grandview. And the way we're finding out about it is somebody will call in and say, hey, I think you've got a leaking standpipe. You might want to check it out. And when we send out water operations staff, what they find is somebody has either opened the valve or tried to open a valve to obtain water. And we're seeing that it's contractors working on construction sites. It's private individuals that may want that water to recharge their wells or to use for whatever purpose. But we're having so many of these instances that we're going to take steps to basically protect those facilities, lock them down, if you will. And we have some technology, some equipment in mind for doing that. One of the issues for us is that it may make it more difficult for the fire districts to access the hydrants or access the standpipes for water for fire suppression. So we'll need to work through that issue, but it's critical that we do something at this point, particularly with the standpipes off our 24-inch lines. You know, as you're aware, we operate those lines often at high pressure, and those blow-offs are capable of releasing a large volume of water if we don't know that somebody's accessing them. We've had instances where they left the valve open and water's flowing out. We've had instances where the facilities are damaged. If we were to have severe damage, we could have a catastrophic failure at the connection point, which could end up spilling millions of gallons of water, starving industries at Cherry Point for water. The pressures that we operate, particularly at the lower elevations on our system, can cause basically it's a life safety issue as well as can cause significant damage if our 24-inch lines breached. So we feel immediate responsive action is necessary at this point. I think we're also going to see more attempts as we move into the summer. If it's a dry, hot summer, and you got folks that their wells are dropping, you've got contractors that want water for dust control. All these things are pointing to us locking down those facilities. Any questions on that?
Brian has a meeting with Fire District 7 that he's trying to set up, and there's some urgency on this. So if they're going to not have a meeting with us until July or August, we may do some unilateral stuff.
Yeah, consider declared emergency as appropriate.
Okay.
So I have specific comments and questions. Brian, when I first got tours of our facilities, and then the recent updated tour I got, second time I've been on a tour of all our facilities. I'm a background with signal processing data, and so I've always been interested about the resolution and the data rate of our readings. And I've asked questions about it. And one of the things I'm wondering about is if there's a way, using time series analysis of our own pressure data readers to be able to detect leaks. And certainly, inappropriate action on our distribution system. And that may be very cost effective to catch.
Yeah, we use that already for, like pipe ruptures and things like that. The issue that we've got is the end use meters that we've got, the error bands on those are big enough so that they would obscure a leak. So that's kind of the dilemma that you've got there. And if it suddenly starts to kind of wander, where it looks like there's more and more loss, you might conclude there's a leak and there's not. There's a meter that's going slower and slower. So you've got, and we do meter maintenance and, we rectify that, but it's one of the dilemmas you've got on a water system is not like a power system. Where in a power system, when you've got a leak, bad things start to happen real quick. On a water system, you can have such mush in your data.
That's the thing, the system itself is mushy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because on such a large amount of water, there's compressibility, all kinds of.
Yeah, not so much compressibility, it's just error in your reads on electrical quantities, current and voltage, you can get, it's as tight as you want, you specify revenue meters and you get, really, really precise readings. But on the water side, you got to measure output versus sales, essentially that's what you're looking at, what's leaving the plant. And there's meter error at both ends that's so large that it would obscure any leak. Unless you have a pipe rupture, and then it's obvious, you get overflow alarms and everything works.
Okay. And the other thing is that, thanks for that answer. I'm glad you guys really thought that through. The other,
Not me, our operators.
Okay.
I asked the same question. They had it all figured out.
so the other issue is regarding people who want water. Perhaps a naive, perhaps on my part, but helpful thing to do is to make sure that people who want to legitimately have bulk water know where to get it. I'm just joking and saying, hey, before you steal this water, you can get it pretty cheap at our bulk plant.
Yeah. So right now, we don't
And
have a
less likely to get
dispensing.
killed.
Yeah, we don't have a dispensing process at our plant. Every water corporation I've ever worked around has exactly what you say, and it's got a little snout that you bring over, and people drive up with a pickup with 500-gallon.
Yeah, we really need to do that.
Yeah, and we will have something like that at plant one when we do the redesign. We've talked about having temporary meters set up on some of our standpipes so that we could do water sales in the summer. And I know last time I talked to Kurt, he was still looking at doing that. So
Yeah, why not use a scale? Yeah, that we can use a scale.
oh, because meters are standard.
I mean, if we can't if we can get a meter going here at plant two, then let's use a scale. I don't care how we do it. I'm saying there's got to be a way to do
It'd
it.
be something we'd meter at an external standpipe to avoid having third parties just have access to our sensitive facilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that
So-
the other thing we're doing, commissioners, and we do it primarily at plant one, we do set up a manifold on a fire hydrant outside the fence of plant one and put temporary meters on that manifold so that particularly contractors that are needing water for dust control, et cetera, can sign an agreement with us and then access water 24/7 at those metered points at plant one. We've also done that occasionally at plant two. The issue with plant two is that they can only do it during business hours because we lock the gate at night. So,
Sure.
so we do have a couple of points where public could contract with us for
Just saying,
water.
wherever this vandalism occurred, we could put a sign that said, do yourself a favor. We'll be glad to serve you water, and you're less likely to lose your life in the process.
Yeah. I think part of the issue too is that we're picking up the fallout from the fact that the city of Ferndale is restricting water use in the summer, and that includes water use by contractors. And so we're the second choice, if you will.
I think we'd be glad to help, right? It's fair to say we'd be glad to help, but just let's do it appropriately instead of stealing it. That's all I'm gonna say.
We agree with you.
Yes. The last thing that I have, and just, I don't want to belabor it, and I'll just mention it, but discussion on irrigation, use of water, in the context of the budget. Also wanted to add that we talk about irrigation, but we're starting to see a growing demand. The use of the irrigation water is supply water for a potable system that a private individual or a water association may install. So we got more than just irrigation use off those connections. And that's all I have.
So water associations are using irrigation water for.
Not,
Well,
potentially.
if you
could be.
recall, yeah, last year, there were 4 water districts that got into real flow trouble because
Right.
of low, yeah. And one of the options that we offered to them was running pipeline to them, and they could use our raw water as input for a potable system. And 2 of them were seriously looking at that, but it was more expensive to run the pipe down than to drill a new deeper well. And so they went ahead and drilled, and that's fine. They need to
Yeah.
make those calls for their
Okay.
customers.
Great, thank you. Anything else? All right, thank
Thanks,
you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Moving on to commissioner reports. Do you have a report?
A big one.
You do. Keep it fast.
Okay.
We're behind schedule.
We're behind schedule.
That makes me feel.
Okay. Okay, we're ready for me to talk fast. I made a meeting request to learn more about Opalco's tidal energy project. I'd like to, if I get a meeting for next week, I'd like to put it on my per diems. On Monday, I have a meeting with the general manager of the Lummi Nation to talk about their investigations into tribal energy sovereignty, including some ideas they have about both municipalization and supply. On Thursday, there's the first salmon ceremony. And I'm planning to attend. We, commissioners have attended. I think we're all invited.
Mhm.
All the local electeds are invited. It's from 10 to 2 at the Lummi Nation. You know where they do that.
Yeah. Yeah, you went last year, didn't you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or the year before, 22, I think. It was wonderful.
I am a candidate now as well. I
Yes.
filed last week for rerunning for my current position. There's also 2 other entries in that position. So I will be in the primary as well as the general. I hope I'm breakthrough in another way that this may be the first primary election for the PUD in history. But I'm not certain. Certainly, if anybody has any thoughts. But anyway, just an FYI. I would like to put forth a motion, and maybe I'll draft an email for a resolution honoring Christine Vant for her service to the PUD.
Yeah, I think we were going to do that. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's okay if I draft it,
Sure.
give Chris some thoughts and.
Well, we've done that with every retiring or every departing commissioner. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah, I
if
think
we can
this
get
is
the
good.
resolution
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
well, okay.
Yeah, like they're all unique. Every commission's been unique. Yeah, but I've got some special thoughts to share. There was a person who was considering filing last week for Christine's position who didn't file. Her name is Christina McGinnis. I think she spoke to both of us. I would like to, would like to meet with her and get a debrief. She has worked for the Department of Ecology. She works for DNR. She's worked for the city of Bellingham, and she's worked in, I think, one other interesting capacity around water. And anytime anybody's interested in the PUD, I'm more than interested in seeing what they have to share, what their thoughts are. So I'm going to meet with Christina on Friday. I don't need to put that as a per diem. If it's relevant, it's okay. If it's not, I'm personally going to take that as a learning opportunity for myself. I'm not going to put that as a per diem.
Yes, yeah.
Moving on, I'm curious about and we'll wait to hear from John how that's going about the conversation with the city and, on the issue about the discussions around, analysis of the.
And I think John was just waiting to hear back from them for dates, so he'll let us know.
Yeah, and I just curiosity. There's a municipal water law meeting coming up very soon. Do you remember when this?
There are many that are coming up
No, the
very soon.
PUD Association, Wakuda is doing a municipal water law.
I don't know offhand. I know,
It is coming.
I know the WOOC is as well.
It could be tomorrow. I just fear that it's tomorrow. And I plan to attend and I plan to per diem that unless there's an objection. It might be the same day that's something else, so, any issues with that?
No, I think I'm the representative. and I
So
would-
frankly,
yeah,
if you want
yeah,
to
yeah.
do it, then you do it.
Yeah.
I'll per diem it and I'll just attend for information if I can make it. If it's on your calendar. I'll keep going.
I just can't get internet in here.
Yeah, and we'll figure that out.
Yeah,
One of us will. There's no reason for both of us.
right.
The next thing is BEAD. Darn it, for obvious reasons, I'm talking to a lot of community members again, and I'm hearing a lot of continued push for PUD action that helps to deal with the issue of affordability as well as quality of service for most of Whatcom County, including years that are considered served. And we've had many discussions at the commission about this. But be ready, there's a double election this year, and we're gonna get a lot of push for trying to help to deal with the affordability issue as well as the level of service issue from the election. That's just an FYI.
You know, Atula, before you go on, I think that it's really, because you brought up something that actually is really important, that because you will be campaigning and you will be talking to a lot of the electorate, that we need to differentiate between campaigning and then your service in this job. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
for sure.
if you're attending some events as a candidate, like you can't per diem them also. They have to be really just for your own.
Yeah, none of the
You know,
things I've
yeah.
talked about so far
Yeah.
for Dean having
Yeah.
to do with
I'm
candidates.
just worried that. for
Yeah, I'll
you,
be careful. I'll be careful, and these guys are here to slap
Sure.
my hand. Or worse, or worse.
And we can talk,
Yeah.
more about those
Yeah.
guidelines. and stuff.
Yeah, and I absolutely am open to that kind of feedback, but thanks for saying that. Then the last thing about broadband is the hybrid option. I continue to be curious. And one thing that came up in our broadband discussion today about the hybrid option, which is, for those who don't know what that means a combination of fiber for the middle mile function and then wireless for the last mile function. So we're not actually running fiber to individual homes, where in cases that makes sense. And one of the things that just occurred to me, Chris, with the open access model and the hybrid model is that with a pure fiber approach, if we nail everything, we might be 10% of access. But with a hybrid model, we could be opening up open access to maybe 20%. Just a thought. It's something that just occurred to me as part of our meeting today. Thanks, that's all I had from my report.
Mine is considerably shorter. I will be attending that water committee meeting. It's on my calendar.
Okay.
My phone is just updating, so I can't look at my calendar. So you don't have to go to that one.
Thank you.
And then everything else that I'm doing is already on the list, so we don't have to discuss them. And that is it for me.
So if I may make a comment.
Sure.
John and I just got the latest markup from Ecology on municipal water law. And I'm not an attorney.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff you look at.
No, they're not.
Well, just as an engineer, and a broke down engineer, I read that thing and I was incensed. It was just, they took all of the comments that we made and said, well, okay, here's how we can dance around that. and rewrote it so that they had the exact same exemptions, the exact same problems for us, with different wording, and I was not happy. John may have a different read on that. I don't think Bill Clark had a different read, and he's already been through. Bill is an attorney, and he's very much involved in water law down in Olympia. So, anyway, happy to talk to you about that anytime. Love to hear what comes out of the meeting if I'm not
Yeah.
there. Otherwise, I will be there as well. But it's the markup itself just came out. I can forward that to you if you
Okay.
want to see
Yeah,
it.
that'd be great.
It's a
Thank you.
big old red line, and it, like I said, it goes in circles and comes right back to where it was after pointedly ignoring all of our input. Yeah, it's very frustrating, but
Okay.
anyway, they finessed it so that it's still, you have to perfect your right, otherwise it's relinquished even if you're a municipality.
Right.
Which is, that was the original problem that we cited, is this is not right, it's not the intent of the legislation, but they're still after that.
Okay, so the last thing we have is public comment. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment?
Oh.
Todd?
Great.
Do you have a hand?
Rick, you need 30
Sure.
minutes?
I'll just, hi, Todd Legacy here, talking about the, the appointment position. And I'd just like to point out that if you offer some people the opportunity to write their answers and then expect other people to provide verbal, you should provide the same opportunity for written response. So, thank you.
Is there anyone online who can't see?
We have, no people asking questions right now, no hand
Okay,
raised.
great.
Could we see the full list?
Yes.
Yeah, that is a business. No, we should.
Just for future use.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Hard to-
Now,
Okay. All right. Okay, well, that concludes our meeting. So it is, do we have a time?
we are
It's
about
10:17 and this meeting.
Okay. Oh, no.
Sure.
You're the chair.
Consent, unanimous consent.